Ladies and gentlemen, hello again and welcome back to the Don't Worry Dispatch. On this installment of the Don't Worry Dispatch, we'll be talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Met Gala tax the rich dress hullabaloo. And also, we're going to talk about the California recall election and the unsuccessful recall of Gavin Newsom and why that probably is, on balance, still a good thing despite Gavin Newsom's many flaws. So let's begin by talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, everyone's favorite congressperson to talk about at bare minimum, and this incident involving the Met Gala and the tax the rich dress, her posturing around that, and this New York Times copy. There is a lot to say. The internet likes saying all of these things, and as this is a YouTube-based format, I'm leaning into it a little bit. I'll be shameless in my setup of this, but there's also some really substantial things to talk about involving this New York Times copy, because I'm reading this New York Times copy not because it's the best copy, but because there are things that we need to talk about that are problems inside of this copy. So this is from the New York Times. AOC's Met Gala dress triggers many responses. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York arrived at the Met Gala on Monday evening dressed in a custom Brother Vielas ivory wool jacket dress with an organza flounce. Can you tell that I'm not into fashion very much? And the message of tax the rich emblazoned in red across her back. In video footage shot before her arrival, she can be seen making her way to the vehicle that delivered her to the gala, a masked aide holding up the train of her dress while she smiled brightly and waved at her fans. Designers and corporate sponsors generally pay the hefty price of admission, $35,000 a ticket or $200,000 or $300,000 a table for the gala guests, who typically include a quorum of Kardashians, Hollywood A-listers, and supermodels. The star-studded event is often referred to as the Oscars of fashion. Many New York City elected officials are invited, as well as, quote, guests of the museum who do not pay to attend. So, we begin here with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representative from New York City. This is now her third year where she was eligible to attend the gala, and this year she has decided to attend it. The first year running against Joe Crowley, she won. She didn't attend the gala. The second year, it was canceled because of the pandemic. Boo-hoo. My heart weeped. I actually remember something about that and maybe cracking some jokes about it at the time. This year, she decides to attend the gala. And there is criticism around her attending the gala, and I guess we can start there before we get into the specific redders on the left making these criticisms and the New York Times framing of this, which I think are different points of discussion here as well. So beginning on the actual decision to go to the gala, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's affirmative defense for this is, I am forcing the conversation about taxing the rich. And I gotta say, on this defense, anyone who says she's overtly wrong is lying, but anyone who says that she's dead on right is also wrong as well. She's about, let's say, 2/3 right. So what is she right about and what is she wrong about? She's right that her wearing the dress has forced a conversation about taxing the rich and whether the rich are taxed enough. That conversation, however, has been out there for a long time, and I think the valid criticism is not, okay, yeah, you definitely got people to say tax the rich. I mean, how many times have I said it during this podcast? In fact, I'm doing an entire episode around it. This is a very strong affirmative argument for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doing this, except for the issue that we're not going to, during this episode and probably during the broader discourse online, really talk all that much about what taxing the rich should look like. To wit, I just saw this week a story about the Democrats and the new budget bill and a discussion about capital gains and taxing gains and dividends at the exact same rate. And I mean, there's no sort of exploration about how should we be taxing dividends versus gains? Should we be taxing activities like shorting? And I mean, should we be looking into crypto markets as being bad for the global economy, but also the global environment? Tax the rich doesn't get us to anywhere on that. look, even if you take all of Bezos's money and you took it tomorrow, you are funding the federal government here in the United States for upwards of 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. That's looking at the annual budget. The annual budget's close to $2 trillion. Bezos only has, I think, in pre-divorce, I think Bezos only had 150 billion. I say only. Obviously, that's an inordinate amount of money for any one person to have, and that is certainly the size of many small economies and many small nation states, and Bezos could go and do a world of good there. But in terms of just taxing the rich here in America, it's got to be more than that. It's got to be taxing activities like stock investment. It's got to be about taxing properties more, taxing inheritance more, and tax the rich just sort of gets us into like a superficial conversation. Is it better than not doing that? Yeah. And insofar as it makes people uncomfortable there, which I have questions about how much it even does that, I guess it's good. But again, where she's at least a third wrong, maybe I'm talking myself into 40 to 45% wrong, honestly, at this point, is that it doesn't actually really move the conversation any further. Does this change Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema? No, it doesn't. They're still on their little, I'm a responsible adult power trip, pretty in pink over there, and Grandpa Joe. And I think, insofar as it comes in the same week as AOC is feuding with Joe Manchin, I don't think the optics are playing into her favor. That being said, we're now talking about AOC, and we're analyzing her and thinking about her actions. And I want to say that I'm trying to be pretty balanced here. You're coming down 55-45 certainly suggests at least some degree of weighting. You might say I'm being overly fair, but at least I'm weighing the good and the bad, right? The one thing that sticks out to me about the AOC discourse, and this will get us into the second part of the New York Times article here, is that we are looking at her and picking her apart and analyzing her, and rightfully so. I'm not saying this stuff is not constructive. It probably is constructive. It's probably a good thing. But it's certainly happening in a way that it never happened with Bernie Sanders this last time around. And I'm not talking about his 2016 run. I'm talking about, what was he really doing between 2016 and 2020? And shouldn't that have gotten more criticism? And shouldn't there be more criticism of his campaign? And I got to argue yes. And my argument for yes essentially is being made by the New York Times for me here. Because in order to look for left criticism of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who does the New York Times go to? They go to Brianna Joy Gray, who was the former national press secretary for Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign. Arguably one of the worst hires that Bernie Sanders did, and certainly considering how high profile she was, really needs to be looked at with some greater skepticism. This is as bad as when Sanders hired Manafort's running buddy for the 2016 primaries, Tad Devine. These are not strong hires. And if Brianna Joy Gray, and even just the hiring of Joy Gray, have been scrutinized broader, with greater intensity by progressive and left outlets, you wouldn't then be turning to Brianna Joy Gray. Where's her broadcasting partner, Virgil Texas, these days? What happened to him? Where's he at? She doesn't talk about him very much anymore. You wouldn't be holding her up as the arbiter of what is and is not good progressive politics and what is the right way and the wrong way of doing this. She should be a marginalized voice within the left. And because she has not been, I don't like calling for the tearing down of the de-elevation of people, but when someone earns de-elevation, they ought to be de-elevated because it does harm to the broader political movement. Going to the New York Times copy here, more surprising than the rote judgments from her political opponents was the criticism of Ocasio-Cortez generated from the left. A chorus of dissatisfaction from progressives and self-described socialists disappointed by a gesture they said caricaturized a progressive cause and underscored their sense that she is not maximizing her ability to fight for working people from Congress. I mean, again, I think there's an open debate to begin this conversation of, well, gee, how much how much clout do we really think Ocasio-Cortez and the squad have inside of the House? It's some. One could argue they could do more. I'm even semi-receptive to that, like 33% receptive to that. But also then we need to do some counting and go, yeah, there's some real limitations here. Brianna Gray, the former National Press Secretary for the 2020 campaign of Sanders and the co-host of the aptly named, that's my own editorial comment, Bad Faith podcast, said that Ocasio-Cortez is, quote, held to a unique standard exactly because people expect more of her, which is extraordinarily rich coming from Brianna Joy Gray. Again, where's Virgil Texas, Bree? What happened to him? Joy Gray said that some of the progressive backlash to the dress grew out of a more general disappointment with some of her policy stances. Quote, people are disappointed in her behavior outside of this context, and this seems to be reflective of a lack of commitment that is demonstrated in a purely political context. So even Joy Gray's best defense of this level of outrage is, yeah, it's not really justified, but we're upset at her for other reasons. Okay, valid it may be, but you're at least saying that you're using this as a transference point, and this is starting as the defense position. This is not a great place to be to defend this. Danny Haifong, a socialist activist and writer, said what offended him was not the dissonance of the self-described democratic socialists hobnobbing with the elite, but, quote, AOC and the squad are not leveraging their enormous base of support to demand the very thing she puts on her dress. I think that Danny has a more solid point here on the latter. But again, gets back to what's going on with our senators. Warren, Sanders. Sanders just last week was praising Chuck and Nancy for doing the best they darn well could on this. And I don't hear the criticism towards Sanders on this. And Sanders is an ally. He's fighting the good fight. He wants what I want. But if we're going to criticize people, frankly, I think there's sort of two arguments here. One, the senators are more relevant than the representatives. They just are. Even if you want to say the squad's bigger, the senators are worth at minimum 4 representatives apiece. There's 435 seats in the House and there's 100 senators. So yeah, they're worth 4.3 senators or 4.3 representatives apiece. That's like the whole squad right there in Bernie Sanders. Second of all, Sanders is in the House and he is uniquely positioned to go up against the main opponents of this. Sanders and Warren are the tag team that should be facing up against the upstarts that are Manchin and Sinema. And Sanders and Warren are sitting on the sidelines. If you want to go after Sanders and Warren for not doing more to go after Manchin and Sinema, I'm with you on this. I even like the fact that AOC is fighting with Manchin. Could she have done this sooner? Sure, I'm down with that. I'm not necessarily even hearing that argument, though. I'm hearing that there needs to be some sort of House mutiny, and it's really missing the point. You can have whatever mutiny you want in the House, and whatever effects that mutiny has will be mitigated in a substantial way by these delinquent senators. So unless and until Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are brought to heel, and my God, I hope they are, and I would love for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a representative, to do that on her own against these 2 petulant senators. I just submit that she's not actually all that well positioned to do that. When she is a senator. If she is a senator and Sinema's a senator and Sinema is in there going, minimum wage, no way. At that point, I expect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a colleague, to stand up and go, my colleague, Kristen Sinema, is absolutely morally bankrupt. I know she's not financially bankrupt because all of these moderates tend to be the people coziest with the corporate donors. So she's probably doing quite well on regular bankruptcy. But in terms of ethics and in terms of morals, she's absolutely bankrupt, and I'm ashamed that she's part of our caucus. But it's just a different conversation when you're in the House. There is a certain amount of power that AOC has. It is limited. I think that she needs reinforcements in this upcoming midterms. If you want to see her do more, if you are one of these critics, I guess I ask, what are you doing to pad out her numbers further? Because the Progressive Caucus is just simply not that large. I like AOC. I think that at this point, she is the progressive movement, of which I consider myself to be a part of, whether they want me or not. I think she is the best chance we have of having a progressive nominee for president who might actually be able to beat the Republican challenger that they're going up against. She is really media savvy. She gets analytics and gets how to communicate with Gen Z. She is photogenic, intelligent. The fact that she can go to these Met Galas and that fashion designers want to work with her is probably a good thing on balance and not a bad thing, because she's never going to win over the type of people who don't want to wear a mask when they go to Walmart. That is not necessarily who AOC is going to win over. Or if she is going to win over those people, she'll win them over in a completely different way, in a completely different media outfit, in a completely different media appearance. The greatest redders can work all sorts of different rooms. Bobby Kennedy was able to obviously speak to all the country club elites and everything like that, but also had like a real touch with the average person. And I'm not necessarily saying Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is Bobby Kennedy, but what I'm saying is that effective rhetorical communication works like that. You're not doing the same thing in all these places. So it's not like you go to the country club to connect with the masses. You go to the country club to connect with the country club. You go down to the local bar to connect to people in the local bar. And unless you're Beto O'Rourke and you stand on the tables, you might have a decent chance so long as you kind of conduct yourself like a normal person. Now, let's move on to the California recall election. I don't have as much to say about this. The right person, I guess, won. Gavin Newsom stinks. He shouldn't be governor. And what the Democratic Party did here to the voters of California really stinks. They should have pulled the chair out on this guy. And they should have pulled the chair out on this guy because he was doing such a bad job that he even opened up the door for this election to be possible. I get that there is some sort of argument that it is easier to keep an incumbent in office than to run in a completely new candidate. That's all well and good, but especially as you look at these numbers where Newsom wins 63-36 on the recall decision, they had room to grow or room to shed, however you want to look at it, in terms of actually doing better. Because Larry Elder was the odds-on favorite here. Even Larry Elder only was able to get 46% of the potential if Newsom is recalled, who should replace him as governor. Larry Elder not even able to fully connect with the electorate who wanted to recall Gavin Newsom. So what that tells me is that there was a real opportunity for the Democrats in the state of California to run someone else and be able to very successfully defend the seat. Now, I say it is good on second order, and excuse me, I was getting some messages here from my phone. I say this is good on a second order thing because Elder would have made an absolutely horrible governor. He has no real governmental experience and was sort of just proud of that. So before you even get into any of his stated views, like the guy is just like, I don't know nothing about no government, and I don't need to. It reminds me of Herman Cain when he was mocking. This is before mocking the coronavirus. And then what happened to Herman? Where's Herman? What's he up to these days? Can he do the show? I'm hearing he can't. But not from him. But Herman, made fun of, why do I need to know anything about foreign policy? Famously saying, I'm not going to need to know who the prime minister of Uzbekistan is. This sort of boastful ignorance thing is really, really dangerous to actually put into power. I'm assuming everyone watching this show understands that because we just all lived through Donald Trump's presidency. However, it still bears acknowledgement that that right out the door would have made a Larry Elder governorship disastrous. California is the 6th largest economy in the world. There are a lot of standards for safety and any other things that get set in California that Elder would have actively tried to change. And then we get into the issue of Dianne Feinstein, the walking, talking advertisement for the gerontocracy and the absolute need to impose a constitutional requirement that you cannot run for re-election after the age of 80. God, we need it so badly. Yeah, I'm including Joe Biden in this. Dianne Feinstein, though, is the gold standard for this argument. Oh, her and Grassley as well. But there are some other ones, too, who really big question marks. So Feinstein, she very likely might not serve out the rest of this term. There have been issues with her and a lot of reporting about her faculties being diminished and everything like that. And Elder was saying that he would upset the apple cart in the Senate and make it 51-49. And part of me would be very amused to see the air get let out of the Joe Manchin Kirsten Sinema balloon. Because here's the thing. When they have to fall in line and vote with the team, they're really not, they're nothing special. And if they start voting with ours too much, they start to kind of smoke themselves out. You start to see what's really going on here. So their existence requires this 50-50 split. They're so dependent on having their party just strong enough to stab in the eye repeatedly, and Larry Elder threatened that. So it would have been slightly amusing to watch that fall apart for Manchin and Sinema, but Elder would have been an absolutely horrible governor. Now you get into his views. I think one thing that will stick with me as a result of this race is the fact that Larry Elder has said some really abysmal things that if Larry Elder was a different guy would have been the end of his candidacy or would have just been absolutely mega scandals. In particular, the one that really sticks out to me is his comment about slavery and slave owners. Larry Elder holds a position that, I gotta be honest, I have a hard time imagining any white Republican politician being able to get out of their mouth without really choking on the words. Okay, Steve King would be a little bit different. But Larry Elder holds the position that the slave owners ought to have been paid reparations for slavery because they lost their property when the slaves were freed, which makes the mind spin on any number of levels, and I could run them all down, but then we'll get a little long in the tooth here. The one that I keep going back to is, if you are vehemently pro-life, which I can only assume these anti-abortion crusaders absolutely are, that's the shield that they hold in front of themselves as they charge with bayonets. If you're really pro-life, then slavery is an absolute abridgment of one's right to life. And as such, okay, yes, there was a law that said that life is property, but you clearly do not believe that is the case, and you would believe that such a law is vastly unjust. And so, yes, there are beneficiaries within that system, but this is a kind of fundamental moral affront, and absolutely 100% there is no coherent reason why you would support slave owners getting reparations if you truly believed that one is entitled to the right to life, and that life ought not to be abridged, that when that is written in the Constitution, that is right, let alone Larry Elder's own personal background or whatever. So I wanted to bring that up because, at the end of all of this, they really did dodge a bullet. And I'll be thinking about this one for a long time, because as bad as Ron DeSantis is, I think if he said something like that, and if that came out, it would be over. It wouldn't be over for Trump, obviously not. But if it came out for Pompeo, that'd be the end for Pompeo, because he's not strong enough to go all in on it. And it worries me that there are these little blind spots in the media. I guess that is the through line in terms of media coverage, mainstream media coverage here today. You have these little blind spots in the mainstream media where things can get through to the absolute peril of all the rest of us, whether it's a person like Bree Joygray getting serious burn in the middle of a New York Times article looking for left critics. So this is the New York Times elevating this person as a super hyper valid left critic. I'd sooner see her elevate Vosh over Brianna Joygray, and I know Vosh is a guy who is problematic in his own rights. But that's what I'm saying. When the New York Times makes this sort of decision, it does something. When media chooses not to focus too much on this little Candace Owens, Larry Elder line and really make him sort of explain this one out because they're scared, because they know that the discourse could get a little messy. It happens at our own peril, and more importantly, it shows bad faith actors, pun intended, that there is the ability to do this thing again, that there's this little loophole and you can squiggle your way back through it. That's going to do it for this episode of the Don't Worry Dispatch. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want more Don't Worry About the Government, please go and support my show over at patreon.com/DWATG. That'll get you the full video versions of the episodes. That will also get you access to bonus content. I'm trying to put out more bonus content. There will be more of that. We're just getting a little bit more active here now that I'm settled in, kind of, I guess, over a bit of summer vacation. You can follow the show on Twitter at twitter.com. Yeah, I'm going to give you the full hyperlink at DWATG. Go to at DWATG. Jeez Louise. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify. I want to thank you guys so much for listening. And until the next one, bye-bye.